Every city you burn, I'm gonna build one high.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is April 13th, YC 125, and this is the Eve Universe Show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How you guys doing? I just need to set this up a little bit better. Didn't quite get everything done in time. Where is my... All right, guys. All right, today we are going to cover some lore. That's what we obviously do here most of the time, or a lot of the time. You know, I know a lot of you guys love the lore breakdowns and stuff. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about mechanics and whatnot. However, I thought with everything going on with faction warfare and potentially with what might happen next when it comes to Precursor Crisis and the various different beats that they've set up, I figured that it would be a good opportunity for us to go back to the beginning and look at how the events unfolded back in YC 110 and YC 111 that led to the rise of the Empyrean Age, the Emergency Militia War Powers Act, the formation of the faction warfare groups. So this is going to be everything from basically the beginning of YC 110, which is 2008, up through the Empyrean Age crisis, and then we're going to try to get to when the Apocrypha event happens, which is in YC 111. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read it from the lore page. We're hopefully going to be a little bit more focused with this, because there is actually a really good write-up on the universe page already. And we can use that as an opportunity to walk through the whole story. Okay, so this is from the, as I said, the universe.eveonline.com lore portal. It's actually honestly kind of hard to find these particular clips sometimes, I find. I search for, I think if you just search for like year YC, you might get most of them. Year YC. And there's some really good breakdowns of... No? We're just not going to cooperate, are we? Oh, well. There are actually decent breakdowns of, like, hold on. YC 109? No? No? Okay, great. Never mind. But they are there. Usually I just search for them on Google. That's how I found these. Sometimes Google has better indexing. But I digress. So what we have here is basically what they've done is, for especially the first like 10 years of the game or so, they did these breakdowns of the lore, or as the events happened, in these kind of, you know, collective narratives. So we're going to walk through these real quick. There's actually 3 of them. The events of YC 110 was significant enough that it's broken into 2 years. And the reason why we're going into this really is because, you know, there are things that could be said as being like the moments in which everything hinges upon, right? There are decisions made or things put into motion by which everything else seems to pivot around, right? Everything before it leads up to it, everything since it has been affected by it and is defined by it. And in EVE Online, that pivot point is the Apocrypha event, in my opinion. The disaster that destroyed the Isogen 5 caches and opened up the wormholes. You know, that really was the moment in which everything changed. Hey, Ganai, gifting a membership. Thank you so much to Given and on behalf of Cone, thank you for that gifted membership, and on my behalf, thank you for the support. 07 to you. All right, so what we're going to be looking at is the events that led up to that and really kind of defined things about the politics in the universe as even we see today. And the reason why I think that's important is because, especially right now, is because as I watch the lore and see how things are playing out, I'm seeing a lot of beats from before, you know, and this isn't laziness. This is, you know, history echoes, right? It doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So I think it's important to look at the lessons that were learned or what happened in YC 110 and 111 and see what that kind of can tell us about what's happening now, and maybe give some context to what we're happening now. All right, so
promoted.
About time it caught up. So on that note, let us begin. The turn of the year YC 110 saw events carry on. By the way, YC 110 is 2008. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. The turn of the events of YC 110 saw events carry on much as they had in the previous year, with little to suggest the tumultuous changes that would begin to take place only a few months' time. Looking at the early months of this year, we might discern faint traces of what was to come, but only with the gift of hindsight could they be marshaled into a pattern leading to a day that will forever be remembered in the history of New Eden. See, it's not just me that says these things, although they're talking about a different day. But it's all the same time period. History doesn't repeat, it stutters. Maybe. January began with some controversy as the Secure Commerce Commission, accompanied by Concord Police, raided the headquarters of the Caldari State Chief Executive Panel in search of records that might show the involvement of the Angel Cartel in Caldari corporate affairs. The submission of the CEP to the search subpoena or no marked perhaps the lowest point yet for the independence of the state, a guiding principle since its foundation, and arguably, given events later in the year, the zenith of Concord's power with respect to the four great empires. Okay, so why is this important? A few things. One, the original allegation is that the Angel Cartel was working with Caldari corporate affairs. That's really interesting, especially when you start to consider the fact that the Angel Cartel are, of all of the corporations, seeming to be one of the pirate factions, the one that seems to be reaching across the aisle the most. We see a lot of Angel Cartel action still in the Caldari, you know, the space that you would normally expect to see, like Garissus and stuff. Now, some of this might be involved with, like, the Deathless and whatnot, but, and how all of these factions relate to those is unknown right now. But the Angel Cartel will play a really big... Oh my gosh, no. Oh, no. Hold on.
They say you should dig 2 graves before embarking on a journey of revenge. That may be true in the real world, but not in EVE Online. In this universe, time is on your side to settle scores. This could be you, and you're about to become the victim of a brutal ambush. The attackers are with a notorious alliance. You're lured into a trap and then destroyed. But in Eve, death is a fresh start. You're reborn, and it's time for some payback. If you know anything, it's that alliances are held together by trust. You break that trust, you break the alliance. Those pirates were just one corporation among dozens under the same flag. Altogether, that's thousands of people. So you befriend one member, and then another. Soon you're invited to join them. The bad guys have no idea you're part of the team now. You start moving up the ranks. You're given privileged information, access to the Alliance war chest. They're counting on you for leadership. They've come to trust you. So now it's time to make a choice. You can keep building power, or you can take your revenge. The fate of an empire rests with you. The moment is yours. You decide to take it. Their wealth, their assets, even their territory. The heist is flawless. Without firing a single shot, you've brought an entire alliance to its knees. In just days, it falls to a rival. The decisions you made changed the entire map and the course of events for thousands of others. At every step in your journey, the outcome was always in motion. Because in Eve, your path is unscripted and your choices have meaning. They will make an impact. So what would you do with that kind of power? Play the game and find out for yourself. Eve Online. The universe is yours.
Okay, well, that was exciting. My son is having a bit of a tantrum at school, so that's going to be a fun thing to deal with in a couple hours. But until then, let's get back to this story. You know, while we're taking a break, I do want to also talk a little bit about an update to the Shadow Wars. So the Shadow Wars have continued on. Obviously, the Gallente have started to kind of flagger in both cases. The Amar had a pretty good push that put them above, and then has recently been really, really ramping up. The Gallente continue to be kind of steady in both, but the spikes from the other races are putting them up. Now, there's this spike here, right here. This is exactly 10%. It goes 46.4 to 56.3. So maybe not exactly 10%, 1%, but basically 10%. The reason why that's important is because from the information that I have, which apparently the person who's doing it, she's not being too quiet about it, although their name escapes me at this exact second. That's exactly 10,000 data cores. So this kind of confirms our previous suspicion that basically we're looking at 100,000 data cores per technology. Let's see. That's it for that, I think. It's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see as there's more and more supply out there, and then there's more and more big buyers, especially since there are people who have made a lot of money in the event that might be interested in now reinvesting that money. So I don't know whether or not this is going to continue to be, like, we may actually see more and more steps up as time goes on, as people turn from farmers to purchasers and collect and gather together a whole bunch of people's farming and put them in as big lumps. All right, let's get back to this. So, why is this important? Well, like I said, the Angel Cartel's association with the Caldari is interesting and worth keeping an eye on, but also a big theme that leads up to these events. One of the big catalysts is actually the economic instability of the Caldari state. The thing is that, like, when you have a corporate meritocracy, I've made jokes about them being jackboots and authoritarian, but like, this actually makes sense You know, when things are being prosperous, the mega corporations can be, you know, are pretty lackadaisical and or not lackadaisical, but are more competing to be better than one another in a more showy way, grandiose way. Whereas when times are tough, when things are actually falling apart, when the Caldari are failing to keep things together, the desire to tend towards populism and authoritarianism becomes high. And so we see that in this story, and why I question the rise of Saraki now, because we see a lot of these same echoes of populism and authoritarianism as we saw there. Not quite as much racism, though. So either way. The Independent Gaming Commission finally announced the 5th Alliance Tournament. Yes, yes, yes. The month closed with the Amarth's 7th Fleet under the command of Admiral Vazimir Sakharin, the fleet styling itself the Saracens, in his honor, scoring the Bleaklands what may have looked like a crippling blow against the Mimitar rebels known as the Defiance, destroying 2 capital ships and a dozen support vessels. Admiral Saracen, having fought the deviants for many months, may perhaps have realized privately that the rebel group was down but not yet out. February saw an official launch of a new advanced frigate class, the Electronic Attack Ship. Lydai Corporation in particular trumpeted the virtues of the Kitsune class version and seemed to eclipse other manufacturers in promoting its electronic countermeasure platform. Scientists concentrated on the unusual stellar object that had been looming bright in the starfield across the New Eden cluster, with the University of Kali organized a conference to discuss it. The Blood Raiders choose to express their views on the object by disrupting an Amar holder's 85th anniversary celebration in order to broadcast claims that it heralded their triumph over the Amar Empire. That's interesting. Controversy erupted into full force as the month drew close with a leak of confidential report on Concord's operation in the so-called drone regions, also known as the New Regions, in the northeast quadrant of the New Eden cluster. The activities of Code Aria Inquiry into the rogue drone infestations and the implications of the leaked dossier caused outrage across major empires, with the Caldari State and Amar Empire being most vehement in their condemnation of Concord Inner Circle. So the Code Aria Inquiry is actually a really interesting document. It is an official document put out by CCP. It is the leaked Concord document of their inquiry as to the events leading up to the rogue drone the opening of the drone lands. It was an investigation as to the rise of the rogue drones and the opening of the drone lands. Why is this not working? Hold on. There it is. So, I'm not going to go over this entire document today, but if this is one of the things that you guys would like me to go into, please make sure to post it in the comments below and let me know, so then we can maybe revisit it. Even the start of the 5th Alliance tournament at the end of the month wasn't free of controversy. The Guristas denounced the organizers for excluding them from entering a team. It was revealed that the Caldari mega corporations had sent recruiters from their corporate security forces to watch the event. Yeah, it's like 200 billion ISK, but then they get a portion of it back because it's what is it, 1,000 turn-ins? So it's probably 10 billion. They get at least 10 to 20 billion of it back. March kicked off with all the drama and destruction of the 5th Alliance tournament, with the various factions sponsoring teams. The interest among planet-side populations was at an all-time high. Malatu Shakur, Speaker of the Republic Parliament, so Malatu Shakur at this point is not the Samatar. Okay, there is no Samatar actually at this point. It's worth noting. There's only the head of I can't remember the actual name of the title. Or maybe it is just the Speaker of the Republic Parliament. Even went so far as to endorse the Urshakhan team, causing much comment outside of the Republic. This is actually true because Urshakhan team was supportive of the Defiance, which is the rebel Mimitar group. One Amar holder incurred much disapproval by betting heavily on anarchist Star Fraction Alliance, avowed enemies of the Amar Empire. The tournament continued through the first week into a crescendo toward a thrilling final between Triumphant and the Evoke. I wish that they did this again, you know, where the alliance, where the different groups all bet on teams. A hard-fought battle saw Evoke triumph and win the championship and glory for their Serpentis Corporation sponsors, who wasted no time boasting of the win. We are reading the record of what happened in YC 110. Interest in the so-called Bright Star continued, with Sayan Grilver of Verokyor tribe shaman mounting an expedition to investigate the anomaly, believing it to be a gateway to a spirit land inhabited by the ancestors of Minmatar. Much mocked, the expedition faltered when the anomaly abruptly disappeared in the middle of the month. Interest in the Bright Star diminished after the incident. So, remember, this is not Caroline Star. This is 2008. This is prior to the Dronelands opening. Warfare in the Bleak Lands continued in the meantime, with the Defiant striking back in a resounding fashion after the losses in January, with 8 key 7th Fleet installations destroyed in one day of coordinated assaults. The Amar reaction to this was largely confined to looking for and finding a traitor in their own ranks, with the holder Hejaz Momir executed for treason after being found guilty by military tribunal appointed by Admiral Saracen. Controversially, in an act of literal nepotism, this was followed up with an appointment of Jalir Saracen, nephew of the Admiral, as provost holder of House Momia assets. Amar troubles continued to the end of the month, with 3 prominent Theology Council justices Felix Grange, Alice Gord, and Victor Elaide going missing, along with other council members and many associates. Conflicting reports surrounding the mysterious disappearance from the start, with rumors of a massive military buildup in the Socket border system and even sightings of blood raiders confusing the picture. The status of the missing justices as capsuleers and members of the reformist tendency with Amar politics only fueled conspiracy theories, as did connections with the court of House Family. So, is this before or after the Dronelands opened? No, this has to be after the Dronelands opened, because the Kodari inquiry is a review of that. So my bad. Dronelands are already open, but this star is kind of unusual. It doesn't last forever, though. And it's also worth noting that, like, Felix Grange, in fact, all 3 of these guys, Felix Grange, Alice Gord, and Victor Elaide, are very critical people. Felix Grange being one of the main people, this is the group that helped Jamil Sorum be resurrected at the Matriarch Citadel. April began with a shocking address from the Amar Empire by Court Chamberlain Dashuta Karsoth, so Karsoth, the de facto ruler of the Imperium in the absence of an emperor, in which he revealed that the missing Theology justices have been members of a conspiracy to assassinate him and take over the Theology Council. Karsoth went on to announce the capture of the missing justices and their executions as traitor to the Empire. The royal heirs were notably silent about the entire affair, seemingly content to leave matters to the Court Chamberlain. This turn of events was seen to substantially enhance Karsoth's power, together with his secure grasp of the loyalty of the Ministry of Internal Order paladins and the denunciation of the justices as reformists who sought to overthrow the traditions and religion of the Amar Empire. So, Karsoth, in an absence of emperor, he's supposed to officiate the making of a new emperor. But rather than that, he's basically kind of disrupted the order of things and effectively gotten rid of all of those who opposed him, and has become the de facto leader of the Amar Empire, while the heirs seem to be kind of not really dealing with anything. They've been pretty non-functional. While the Theology Council justices dominated the first few days of the month, the major theme of April was an increasing instability in the Caldari state, with shocks experienced by the Kimoto Stock Exchange. That's the Kimotoro Stock Exchange, the main stock exchange for the state. After major mega corporations such as Kalakiota, Laidai, and Wiakomi issued profit warnings on only the second of the month. Together with signs of the economy running down, protests over working conditions flared up. On Yoma 3, work in a Zumol chemical plant came to a halt amidst violent clashes between workers and corporate security forces. These came to an end, with Zumol Chemical laying off the entire workforce and shipping in strike breakers. So, we're seeing a big escalation of force we're seeing a big escalation in the unrest within the state. Further unrest arose at reports of Kalikiota's security division, Home Guard, treating prisoners and even innocent civilians badly. An embarrassment for Kalakiota as it opened a Home Guard training center. Economic turbulence continued as the CEP debated higher tariffs on imported goods, and it was revealed that both the Laidai and CBD corporations were considering investing in foreign markets to hedge against the faltering Caldari economy. No improvements to the fortunes of the Caldari state was seen as the bad news piled up. A planetary agricultural blight took on the place in 10 and 6. Mass deaths occurred in the Wiakomi drug trial, and massive industrial accident befell Sukavesta plant, killing 57 and injuring 1,200. Indications of a booming Federation economy, even to the point of labor shortages and the need for Mimitar immigrants to fill positions, were surely a bitter twist, if not directly related. So, like, the Caldari is on the verge of collapse, right? May was to give its name to a revelation. While the appointment of the Brutor officer Admiral Faris Lajar as Republic Fleet Chief and Naval Operations on the first day of the month was notably enough in indicating increased power for the charismatic Malatu Shakur, the May Revolution was to take place in the ailing Caldari state, although it seemed at first that the trend of problems in the Caldari state was simply continuing where it left off in April. What started as a mere workers' revolt in an industrial plant on Piak 3 was to become the seed of sweeping change throughout the Caldari state. So here we go, guys. Tibus Heth. The Caldari Construction's armor forge on Piak 3 was not unique in experiencing a worker protest in the 2nd of May. Facilities in the Akanoth and Litsura... Hey, thanks for that. Facilities in the Akanto and Lituria systems were also the scenes of revolt and a general shutdown as workers employed by the Caldari Constructions coordinated a protest against working conditions and the general lot of the Caldari wage worker. The unique aspect of the revolt on Piak 3 was that it was led by a man the entire cluster would come to know, Tibus Heth. So, one thing that's worth noting as we get into this section in particular, there's a lot of mystery involved in the events that are unfolding here. And this story, as it's told here, leaves out the fact that the broker exists and was manipulating events behind the scenes. So the broker is this kind of somewhat mysterious, kind of secretive broker of deals within New Eden. And so he's kind of manipulating every step of the way here, but remaining unseen. All right. The revolt on Piak 3 also paralyzed and threatened one of the most important assets of Caldari Constructions, the armor forge being a key facility producing essential components for starship construction. Perhaps this is why the Constructions chose to call in the Home Guard, the security arm of the Caliceota Mega Corporation, who promptly deployed dropships full of mechanized infantry to the site. Caldari Constructions themselves claimed that Heth was holding hostages and threatening to kill everyone in the armor forge, claims that later were shown to be exaggerated at best. Whatever the rights and wrongs, the dropship fell and the workers' revolt on Piak 3 became something altogether more complicated. As the news of the revolt and deployment of the Home Guard dropships were reported, the Caldari stock markets reacted by plunging the price of the Caldari Constructions downward. Months of financial shocks had enervated the Caldari shareholders, and the fall of the Caldari Construction stocks was steep, and slated to become steeper when the Home Guard were deployed rather than being arrested. The use of mega corporation security forces to restore confidence in the market seemed to have come to an end. Falls across the Caldari stock markets followed in the wake of the plummeting construction stock. In the narrow spheres of share movements, the day had already acquired historic aspects. Events took a grim turn as the Home Guard troops opened fire on the protesting workers when the Caldari Construction CEO, Tokibaria Shutsu, began negotiations with the revolt leader Tibus Heth. If it was an attempt to cut off the head of the worker movement by assassinating Heth, it was spectacularly bungled, with at least one sniper apparently targeting Heth. A young man who appeared to be leading the way to negotiations was shot in Heth's stead, prompting further rioting from the workers and a fierce struggle at the gates. Tibus Heth was recorded by numerous cameras carrying the body of a comrade to safety, images that flashed around the state and New Eden within moments. Even as Tokibaria Shutsu retreated from the fiasco at Piak 3 in his own personal dropship, something remarkable was happening on Caldari stock markets. Caldari Construction stock was soaring. A mysterious buyer who had started to buy the depressed stock's increasingly large trashes, even as they reached rock bottom and deadly violence erupted at the armor forge. While a standoff developed at the armor forge, the Home Guard troops, unwilling to press forward and create what would be undoubtedly one of the bloodiest massacres in the history of industry unrest in the state, Caldari Construction stocks were snapped up. Even as the Caliceota Corporation denied having Home Guard the authority to open fire, someone acquired a controlling interest in the corporation at the center of the unrest. Astoundingly, it transpired that someone in question was Tibus Heth, How this happened remained a mystery, and the theories abound as to secret backers and puppet masters behind Tibus Heth. Yet the fact remained undeniable that Tibus Heth, industrial MTAC operator and Caldari Construction Armor Forge on Pyac 3, became majority owner of the very corporation he worked for shortly after noon on the 2nd of April, YC 110, setting the seal of the new order of the Caldari Constructions. The disgraced Tokibaria Shutso ceded his personal stocks to Heth before taking his own life. Whew. As news of the revolutionary events on Pyac 3 spread throughout the Caldari state, workers' revolts broke out in the territories of all the megacorporations, with notable exceptions being the Ishikone Corporation holdings, where little civil disorder was experienced. Mindful of the outrage and escalations caused by the manner of which the Home Guard handled the Pyac 3 situation, the megacorporations adopted a less confrontational stance towards such revolts. So, what I find interesting here is we see this kind of same thing happen in the state recently. We saw rising escalations of protests up to and including violence and exposures of mega corporation malfeasance. And immediately we see the rise of this populist who then quells the protests and solves the problems, like magically. Having been formally invested as CEO of Caldari Constructions, Tibus Heth secured access to the primary news hub of Caldari State and broadcast an unauthorized address to the entire state. In his remarks, Heth rallied against the corruption of the state by the mega corporations, blamed Gallente influence for distorting the values of the state's leaders, and pledged to restore Caldari to dignity and power. So he, like I said, he's more of like the racist, populist kind of style. Where, whereas the Saraki is more of just a general war hero, as he was the leader of the defense for Samanuni when it was fortified during the invasions. Perhaps stunned by the sight of one of their own leading a mega corporation, rioting workers began to return to their homes. The mega corporations, if anything, even more stunned, remained silent. The first day of May Revolution was over. Ambassador Kaiten Yun. This is important because Ambassador Kaiten Yun is still around quite a bit. If we look at the lore, he's the guy who's talking in front of Concord to this day. So let's find out more about his origin. As New Eden absorbed the events of the Caldari state, one man's career began an arc that would lead him to be reviled by some and cheered as a hero by many others. It started as a fairly mundane matter in the appointment of Kaiten Yun as a Mimitar Republic ambassador to the Concord Assembly. An academic and quiet servant of the Republic, held in some regard by Prime Minister Karen Midgular. Prime Minister, that's the top rank. Yun seemed a choice entirely in keeping with the thoughtful, technocrat-heavy mode of government Midgular had always stood for. Many were surprised, therefore, not least among them Karen Midgular, when Yun used his inaugural speech to the Assembly to condemn Concord for acquiescence in the slaving practices of the Amar Empire and its hypocrisy in allowing the Amar to send representatives to Concord at all. Ejecting from the Assembly for refusing to recant, Yun seemed a broken man. Shunned by his prime minister, he disappeared from public view. His reappearance was quite a different matter. 1 second. I want to check something out. I want to find something real quick. Hold on. Let me see if I can find that speech quickly enough to make sense. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. Dang it, hold on. There we go. I can't put it on here, unfortunately, but I can read it real quick. So, session will now commence. Announce the Concord session moderator. Ambassador Yun, you may begin your introductory address before we proceed to the day's agenda. Congratulations on your appointment. Rising to his feet amidst polite applause that came primarily from the Minmatar and Gallente sections of the audience, Kyton cleared his throat. Thank you, Your Honor. It is a privilege and lifelong dream of mine to be speaking here, at the cornerstone of our civilization, and on behalf of our beloved Republic, to whom I owe my origins and my soul. All the Assembly members nodded approvingly, except for Ambassador Sal. Ambassador Sal at this point, I think, he's the Amar representative. Lord Sal. During my tenure as a professor, I found that the study of history compels a thorough examination of humanity itself. To gain an understanding of our past, we must first understand ourselves and the relationship we share with our fellow man. As an academic, I will always emphasize parity in the telling of our history. As a diplomat, we have a responsibility to our children to be objective when we record events as they take place today. Only then can we navigate through the challenges ahead and forge a better future for all. Kyton paused for a mild burst of applause, while the Amarian ambassador stifled a yawn. As the technology of our civilization advances, so too do the responsibilities to promote its application towards the advancement of peace. With the union of man and machine, we have taken our first small steps into the age of posthumanism, in which science has liberated mankind from the chains of mortality. The Capsuleers are the Empyreans of our age. They are our shepherds to the stars, and these times will undoubtedly be recorded as being among the most pivotal in the history of man. The awesome responsibilities that come with this advancement have brought with them great challenges. I am certain that we will meet some of them with success, but my experience tells me that others, tragically, will remain unconquered, impeding the progress of our humanity and sheltering us from a great enlightenment. I say this because, time and again within these hallowed assembly grounds, our efforts to rise and conquer the fundamental challenges of universal equality and human rights have failed. The Concord moderator frowned as his colleague looked on impassionately. I have always found it astonishing that we have the will and the means to achieve the seemingly impossible, like building titans or creating oceans on dead planets, and yet here we cannot agree on the fundamental tenets of human decency. The silence in this hall right now as I speak these words tells me that the means are here, but it is the will that is lacking. I stand before you as the ambassador of an enslaved race, speaking to an audience within the enslavers, in which the enslavers are listening, and ask myself, how have we survived? We of New Eden, when the definition of humanity remains so elusive, so transparent to so many. A disapproving shout rang out from the Amarian section, followed closely by bellows of support from the Galantean and Minmatar stands. For years I studied the history made within this assembly, and I am convinced that history will judge our generation by the achievements we have not made here. So many times goodwill has been a disguise for indifference. Men have stood on this very spot and insulted my republic with their empty promises, ignoring the pleas of ambassadors like myself, begging for them to see reason instead of selfishly running from it. Murmurs rang out from the Amarian contingency seated behind Ambassador Saul, who is now smirking. My nation holds a seat at this assembly, and yet the overlords who spit on our freedom are permitted to share this honor as well. Is there any greater insult than this? Here they can legislate policies for the alleged betterment of New Eden, when the plight of billions cry out from within their own borders. Why is such blatant hypocrisy allowed to persist? What justification can we give as an assembly to allow our presence a brutal empire that embraces slavery, peddles the women and children of my nation like cattle across its borders, drugs them into obedience, and then dares to appear in this sacred hall under the pretense of diplomacy and goodwill? Ambassador Saul leapt out of his seat. I've heard enough, he shouted, as the audience erupted into discord. I've not traveled all this way to be insulted by a novice. How dare you? Blah, blah. And then it goes into... Yep, that's basically, that's the end of his speech. So, man, what a speech, right? That is the introduction. That's how Kyton Yun got started. This is from the Empyrean Age book. Unfortunately, I don't have the computer set up right now to share this window. All right. So he disappeared from public view. His reemergence was quite a different matter. The Malcolin incident. In the meantime, simmering resentment over the anti-Gallente sentiments expressed by Tibus Heth broke out into ethnic violence on Caldari Prime, the ancestral home planet of the Caldari abandoned when the Caldari seceded from the Gallente Federation. As Gallente gangs vandalized Caldari heritage sites and attacked Caldari living on the planet, the violence escalated over the next few days as Gallente and Caldari repeatedly clashed over heritage sites and in settlements with high Caldari populations. The cities of Toville and Arcurio in particular saw heavy rioting and multiple deaths. The situation spread from Caldari Prime to the Caldari State after Federation security forces used deadly force to quell Caldari rioters. Gallente expatriates of the state came under increasing attack in retaliation for violence and the rising death toll on Caldari Prime. By the 12th of May, many Caldarian Gallente were so repulsed by the rioting and killing that they held anti-violence demonstrations. The most poignant of these was the vigil held at Landfall Shrine in Caldari Prime, one of the most sacred of the Caldari sites, but spontaneous demonstrations were held across the Gallente Federation. Capturing the mood perfectly, Otro Guriushi, the popular CEO of Ishikone Corporation, pleaded for calm and denounced the anti-Gallente rhetoric of Tibus Heth in a statewide broadcast. Caldari stock markets reached favorably to Gurushi's sentiments, and approval was seen within the Gallente Federation and even in the Caldari-aligned Khanid Kingdom. The impact of Guriushi's speech and the grassroots anti-violence movement was to stymie the violence before it escaped beyond control. So out of this kind of chaos and unrest between the Federation and state and the rise of this populist leader comes Otro Guriushi, the head of the Ishikone Corporation. The Ishikone Corporation being one of the only ones that wasn't suffering before. And so he's particularly powerful and one of the more publicly, Ishikone's traditionally one of the more open mega corporations to working with groups outside of the state. So up comes this anti-violence sentiment, which Otro Guriushi kind of continues to push forward towards an agreement, much like there were agreements that were trying to be brought together prior to Uprising. Capturing the mood, within 2 days, a further remarkable development emerged as Otro Guriushi and Soro Forotran, Gallente Federation president, agreed to hold an economic summit at Ishikone headquarters in Malacan. Appearing somewhat wrong-footed, Tibus Heth welcomed the news of the Malacan summit, just as citizens and markets across New Eden breathed a sigh of relief. So again, also, peace treaty, peace meetings, and all that kind of stuff. However, this one doesn't end the same way as the last one, or the one that just happened did. Moving quickly, the Federation sent its economic minister, Lares Hane, to the head of the delegation, transported aboard the mighty FNS Wandering Saint, a Nyx-class supercarrier piloted by the venerable Admiral Alexander Noir, veteran of the Caldari Gallente War, and respected on all sides as a man of peace, who knew what it was to fight. As a great vessel dwarfing its escorts arrived in Malacan and approached the parking orbit of the Ishikone headquarters station, it seemed to carry with it the hopes of both the Caldari state and the Gallente Federation. History will surely view that as the cruelest of ironies. We now know that Otro Guriushi welcomed Lares Hane as the formal opening of the economic summit. Admiral Alexander Noir was preparing to initiate a sequence of events that would leave hundreds of thousands dead. The first sign of trouble came as the FNS Wandering Saint seemed to, indeed, wander out of its parking orbit and turn toward the station itself. Alarms grew as the mighty supercarrier began to accelerate towards the station, and all attempts to contact Noir were ignored. At the point of no return was reached, those who watched it expected a tragic accident, the destruction of the supercarrier, certainly, some damage to the station perhaps. It is doubtful that they expected the station's shields to fail, a mystery that remains unsolved but is attributed by many to sabotage by Noir sympathizers, and the ship to plow into station like a knife thrust into a living body. The destruction that followed was on a scale like nothing in recent memory. No station of its size and density of population had ever suffered such a catastrophic blow. The situation was so extraordinary that the nature of the event so crippling was that there was a considerable delay in assessing what had happened. Communications networks came under severe overload almost as the first brief outlines of events hit the Caldari state. When realization dawned that the Federation Nyx had rammed into the partially destroyed a state megacorporation's headquarters, it was stunning in its effect. Yet the state rallied and a massive relief effort swung into action as corporations and independent capsuleers alike rushed to offer assistance. Reeling and decapitated, the Ishikone Corporation announced an emergency disaster relief program, and the Servant Sisters of Eve responded to in their efficient practice fashion. By the next day, the Ishikone was able to confirm the death of Ortro Goryushi and the entire Gallente delegation. The estimated death toll stood at 421,000, with as many persons remaining unaccounted. In a scale, the disaster was immediately seen as a matter for the whole Caldari state, and in its nature, an attack on the entire state. It's worth noting at this point that, spoiler alert, that was not actually Alexander Noir. Alexander Noir secretly was assassinated by the broker, who then disguised himself as him and performed that action. Quick to recognize this, the Amar Empire Theology Council declared an official day of mourning for the Malakan victims. The Minmatar Republic seemed to await the position of its ally in the Federation, but this was days in coming. Eventually, 4 days after the event, President Soroto Forotan of the Gallente Federation confirmed in all particulars the Ishikone Corporation's account of the Malakan disaster, condemning it as an act of a single man, Noir, and denying any complicity on the part of the Federation. Incredible as this may have seemed to some, the Caldari state took this in grief-stricken silence, with little, if anything, in the way of anti-Gallente protests or violence breaking out. While the citizens of the state mourned the victims of Malakan, Tibus Heth was not idle. The May Revolution was to enter its next stage with the foundation of the Caldari Providence Directorate. This began with a surprise announcement of the Yitri warehouse CEO Tentima Iwisoda that was stepping down and handing full control of the corporation to Heth's Caldari Constructions. In addressing this new partnership, Heth announced the formation of Caldari Providence Directorate and the controlling organization within a new corporate structure. The member of this unusual corporate entity soon became known as the Provosts. I just realized something. Let's look up this name. Nope. Okay. I thought that they showed up recently in the news. Did they not? Wait. Yeah. Yeah. They were one of the groups that found the new ore. They're part of Upwell. They fell into Upwell. Okay. The ability of Tibus Heth and the Provost to acquire another corporation may have startled some, but Yetiri was a relatively minor corporation. More than startling, in fact simply amazing, was the takeover of the Calikiota Corporation, the biggest mega corporation of them all, by Heth and the Caldari Providence Directorate, a mere 2 days after the Yetiri acquisition. Apparently affected by virtue of former KK CEOs Hatakan Oritsu stepping down in Heth's favor, the Calikiota takeover transformed Heth from a demagogue with the power of a corporate CEO to arguably the most powerful man in the state. Concerted opposition by the other megacorporations could have stopped Tibus Heth in principle, but it was soon established that the others were of no mind to act. Addressing the population as a member of the leadership of the Caldari state, Tibus Heth mourned the passing of Ortro Goryushi and the fallen of Malkalin, now numbering over 600,000 dead, and then declared a quarantine of all Gallente expatriates within state borders. This move was not opposed by any of the other Big 8 megacorporations. How expensive were our supercarriers these days? I don't know. Somebody else is going to have to answer that. In other empires, while the Caldari May Revolution and the Malakan disaster was watched carefully, serious events merited the immediate attention of the Amar Empire by the Minmatar Republic. Increasing attacks of the Amar shipping in Minmatar territory throughout May had caused disquiet enough, but the upsurge in defiant activity in the Bleaklands caused serious diplomatic friction. In particular, the presence of informal military Minmatar militias, bolstering the forces of defiant rebels in fighting against the Amar 7th Fleet, awoke in the Amar Empire's wrath. While the Minmatar Republic denied any support of the defiance, the Amar Empire representatives of the Concord Assembly demanded that the Republic curb the defiance and any militias. With a sense of timing not lost on the Amar Empire or the Caldari state, the Republic and the Gallente Federation began large-scale fleet exercises in the Metropolis region using the none-too-subtle name of Operation Brotherhood. Any confidence in Operation Brotherhood may have given the Minmatar Republic, however, was wiped out when the Angel Cartel declared itself the sovereign power of Skarkon, a Republic system on the border of 00 space in the cartel's sphere of influence. Even though Concord dismissed the claims as illegitimate, the Republic looked powerless to intervene as the population of Skarkon welcomed the change, having been neglected for years by the Republic authorities. So this was a big catalyst here. Once again, we're seeing these empires at kind of their most vulnerable points, right? The Caldari are economically falling apart. The Minmatar are politically falling apart. This is a new republic that are having difficulty keeping itself together. And of course, the Gallente are trying to, win the Minmatar further and further onto their side. Yulai incursion. So meanwhile, while this is all happening, secretly, behind the scenes, there was a major fleet known as the Elder Fleet was being built. And it is first exposed on this day. The final act of May Revolution came as the arc of Chitin Union's career blazed into prominence no mere ambassador could have hoped for. On the 29th of May, the Kalakeota Yitri conglomerate agreed on strategic partnership with all of the other Big 8 megacorporations, save for Ishikone. With this agreement, Tibus Heth Caldari Providence Directorate gained control of the vast majority of the Caldari state's industrial base. A unity not seen in the state for decades had been achieved, and would soon be improved on yet further. The penultimate day of May bore witness to two extraordinary events. One of them transfixed the attention of all and eclipsed the other, rather quieter and almost resigned occurrence. Both were important to understand what was to come. At approximately YC 110 530 at 10:30, an armada of Minmatar ships jumped into the Yulai system without using any of the system's stargates. Within seconds, a fleet composed of multiple Naglfar-class dreadnoughts bearing Republic fleet markings, but broadcasting no identifiers, surrounded the Caldari Bureau station, escorted by many Thucker tribe vessels, equally bereft of electronic identifiers. Only a few minutes after the arrival and menacing encirclement of the Concord headquarters, the mystery capitals and escorts jumped out of the system without a shot being fired. As Concord grappled with the pressing question of how an entire armada had jumped into the most secure system in New Eden without using gates and bypassing senatorial suppression fields with contemptuous ease, the news of the nature of the ship raised equally urgent questions for the Minmatar Republic and Prime Minister Karen Midgular. The revelation later in the day that Chitin Yun, the disgraced Minmatar ambassador to Concord, had spoken to Concord authorities just before and during the Yulai incursions, with apparent knowledge of the purposes of the mystery fleet, only intensified pressure on Midgular administration. Disavowing Yun and denying the involvement of any Republic fleet assets in the incident, Karen Midgular appeared to many observers to cut a bewildered figure losing control of the Republic and its institutions and its people. So, back to the thing. Can I find... let's see. Naglfar. Will that help me find it? How do I spell Naglfar? There it is. No results found. Really? 1 second. Is this it? I'm not going to be able to find it, I don't think. And I don't think it's actually that, there is an attempt on Yoon's life, and he goes back and forth with him, but I don't know whether or not he actually gives... Oh, here we go. So they go have a... He shows up, he has a back and forth with them, they kind of blush him off, and then everything jumps in. And he says, "Will you take my warning seriously now, Admiral?" He goes, "You're still not listening to me, Admiral. My exact advice to you and to Concord is exactly that. Back off. You have 30 days to reconsider your hypocrisy in blocking Mimitar's rights to defend itself. If you attempt to intervene with us after this period, we will no longer recognize the Concord Assembly as a governing authority of the Mimitar people, and we will defend ourselves accordingly. Speaker Paukuso, do you understand me? 30 days. Make sure your inner circle masters understand that. Farewell for now. I pray you both come to your senses." And then he disappears. I know you can't see it when I'm reading it from the Empyrean Age book. I'm sorry. As Concord grappled with the impact of Yoon's Yulai incursion had made itself felt. The second extraordinary event of that day passed with relatively little notice. Still in mourning and administratively crippled, the Ishikone Corporation agreed to grant strategic control of the industrial operations of the Caldari Providence Directorate, completing the May Revolution and bringing all of the Caldari megacorporations under the effective control of Tybus Heth. For the first time in centuries, the Caldari were controlled by one man, with the question for many being whether he was the savior of the Caldari nation or its newly crowned tyrant. So I have a couple of videos to show you guys. This is the first one.
We're broadcasting live from inside the Ishikone headquarters in Malcolm, where the scene is utter chaos. This summit was supposed to bring hope to Gallente-Caldari relations, but the Federation escort, a Nyx mothership flown by Alexander Noir, has set a deliberate collision course with this station. Thousands of people are forcing their way to escape hangars now, and our team is desperately trying to make it out on one of the evacuation.
So that was the Noir ramming the Nyx, obviously. And
shockwaves have been felt throughout New Eden, following an ominous turn of events in Yulai, where just moments ago, a tense standoff between Direct Enforcement Division warships and an unknown task force ended without incident. Scope News obtained this video depicting what appears to be a combined mix of Republic Fleet and Thucker tribe vessels converging on the station as if preparing to attack. The two groups have never cooperated before, and the Minmatar government denies any involvement in the incident. Although the area surrounding the station is once again clear, fears remain that the mystery task force will one day return, and with much more sinister intentions.
all right, next. Let's move on to year 2, or sorry, the second half of YC 110. June of the year YC 110 was not to be a month of anticlimax when set against the revolutionary events of May, though many might have wished it had been when the dust of events settled. The first few days were full of problems, but the pace of events was to accelerate beyond imagination on the day that any history of New Eden will surely count as the most tumultuous for centuries, if not ever. It started with the Mimitar Republic slipping further into chaos and the Caldari state seeing Gallente fleeing in the face of Tybus Heth's ascendancy. The Angel Cartel in Skarkon held a referendum on its presence as the ruling power that showed the population to back them and not Karen Midgeler's Republic. Crucial tribe militia were fired on by Republic fleet vessels on the Mimitar-Amatar borders as the government and military tried to stop total disintegration and war from breaking out. Tybus Heth, waxing in power, declared a national draft, evoking the Malakan disaster as evidence of the need for the Caldari state to defend itself. Remember, around the time that Saraki took power, the the state was militarized, and basically every Caldari citizen is now considered part of the military. And I don't believe that they changed that yet. So yeah. Violence on Caldari Prime flared up once more as the sight of Galantians fleeing from the state caused anti-Caldari riots on the troubled planet. President Soroforutan was moved to decree martial law on Caldari Prime and pointed to Tibus Heth as the responsible party for inciting the violence. With the Republic lurching out of control and the state and federation at odds, the Amarr Empire seemed momentarily to be uniquely serene among the great empires of the core. This serenity was rudely shattered by the news that a large population of Starkmanir had been discovered amongst the slave population of the Amatar Mandate. Thought all but extinct after a campaign of extermination by the Amarr centuries ago, the discovery of viable population of surviving Starkmanir within territories essentially controlled by the Amarr came as an astonishing surprise. Confirmed by the servant sisters of Eve and the Minmatar biotech corporation Eifer & Co. One second. Yep, another group in Upwell. Eifer & Co. The news transfixed the Minmatar Republic, with Prime Minister Karen Midgeler acknowledging the news and welcoming the pledge by Amarr Court Chamberlain Dachuta Karsoth. I'm just going to call him Karsoth. To do everything possible to preserve the Starkmanir. Others in the Republic expressed dismay as to how readily Midgeler moved to work with the Amarr on the Starkmanir issue. The Speaker of the Republic Parliament, Malatu Shakur, a long critic of the government and what he considered policies of appeasement, called an emergency session of Parliament to hold a vote of no confidence in the administration of Karen Midgeler. It's worth noting that as we go through this part, right, Malatu Shakur isn't currently the person who's in power in the Republic, and his biggest critic, his biggest outspoken named critic, is actually Karen Midgeler's daughter. So it's like the roles have reversed. Holy old school Concord models. I know, right? Amidst violent scenes, the vote was tallied and found to be overwhelmingly in favor of the no confidence motion. In response, Karen Midgeler dissolved the Republic Parliament and declared Malatu Shakur to be expelled from government. As news of the dissolution of the Parliament spread, riots erupted across the Republic, and citizens are enraged by the lack of action on the Starkmanir issue. Curiously, within a day, the Angel Cartel was to abandon its claim to Skarkon, leaving many facilities behind it. Despite this, Shakur commented that the Skarkon issue was one of many that led to the vote of no confidence in the Midgeler government. As the Republic found itself convulsed by political turmoil, Chamberlain Karsoth moved to assert his control over the situation within the Amarr Empire, recalling Admiral Vanazir Saracen from the Throne Worlds and putting Saracen's Amarr 7th Fleet on standby. Echoes of the Theology Council Justice's affair were seen in Karsoth's detained Admiral Saracen on charges of high treason as soon as the latter arrived in Amarr. The 7th Fleet was swiftly reassigned from Bleaklands to duties in the Iridia region, justified by the lack of any defiance activity for over a week. Even though the former Republic Admiral Kenneth Filmer spoke out in the support of Karen Midgeler the day before, Kenneth Filmer is the current head of the Minmatar group. Hold on. If we go to Frontlines, there we go. That's him. Right? That's right, right? I always get him and the other guy confused. I think that's right. The 9th day of June saw the disappearance of the Prime Minister and ended with the Gallente Federation losing all diplomatic contact with the Minmatar Republic. This perplexing state of affairs, taken with Karen Midgeler's absence, seemed to indicate a total collapse of the Minmatar administration. In fact, it indicated the faint traces of something far more than mere fall of government. YC 110 610 is a date that it is inconceivable could ever be forgotten by the New Eden cluster. It is the date that more than any other defines the year of YC-110, and perhaps can be considered the beginning of a new era, a new age. So this is dawn of the Empyrean Age. Ready? The fulcrum around which this day revolved was the unprecedented neutralization of Concord, an unthinkable happening in the political and military order of New Eden, and yet one which did indeed take place. Early in the morning, Uli was invaded once more by a combined Minmatar-Thucker fleet, once more unidentified, and once more apparently using jump drives and portals, somehow bypassing the sinusoidal jamming technology used by Concord to secure the system. The instant the invading fleet arrived, Concord shut down the stargates leading to Uli and mobilized its entire fleet. Given the size and power of the Minmatar-Thucker fleet that entered Uli that morning, it is doubtful any measures could have been taken by Concord to stop what happened next. As the Naglfar-class dreadnoughts of the invading fleet began to pound the Concord Bureau station, the escorts engaged the Concord defense forces. Casualties in those first moments of intense close-quarter space warfare were massive on both sides, but the invaders were to prevail. As the defenders of Concord's shining star of headquarters were crippled and overwhelmed, the entire Concord network failed. When the Minmatar capitals delivered the death blow, the Concord Rapid Reaction System, foundation of peace in New Eden for decades, was disabled, leaving DED forces reliant on fast deployment out of position and effectively impotent. Their work done, the assaulting force retreated back through their portals, leaving the awesome flagship, a Ragnarok-class Titan, to unleash its Gjallarhorn doomsday weapon just before it departed Uli, ensuring the absolute destruction of the Concord Bureau and any remaining defense vessels. Despite this destruction, an evacuation of the station had been possible by the majority of Concord Assembly delegates were later found alive. Search and rescue vessels combed the system as the Inner Circle took the precautions of evacuating their own station and relocating to an unknown location in Uli 8. Surviving Concord vessels were able to report a total absence of Minmatar and Thucker vessels in the system. With Concord looking to its own, the effects of a crashed network and the absence of the DED enforcement ships began to be felt. Jita, for some the hub of New Eden itself, experienced the consequences in short order, with pirates flooding into the system and taking advantage of the opportunity to plunder without interruption from Concord battleships. In some respects, the Jita market crashing, along with others across the cluster, as SCC systems went offline, was a minor matter. Analysis would later recognize the strike at Concord to be a means to an end, rather than an act with any element of political significance in itself. For the next step in the broader plan was not long in coming, as events shifted to encompass the Ammatar Mandate and the fate of the Starkmanir. Taking the Ammatar fleet by surprise, the Minmatar-Thucker Armada jumped into the Jariza system and, after making short work of the scattered Ammatar patrol groups, began deploying across the system. In particular, the invaders massed on the bulk of their force on the planet of Haltsura Han, which is Yariza 4, where the surviving Starkmanir had been discovered. As waves of drop ships descended on the planet to recover Starkmanir, unconfirmed reports carried news that the Ammatar consulate governor, Anna Ulf was encouraging her citizens to defect to the invaders. This turned out to be true and probably accounts for the notable lack of resistance to the Minmatar incursions into Ammatar space and on the ground. Of course, the presence in the field of the Ragnarok-class Titan may have also factored into the successes of the invaders. Barely had the Amar registered the incursion into Ammatar space when they had to deal with a second Minmatar-Thucker armada in the heartlands of the Empire. Also backed by a Ragnarok class, this fleet struck at Corazor Prime, a core system and home to the royal house of Corazor. Heavy space fighting across the region was seen as elements of the invading fleet sought to deal with the dispersed Corazor forces before they could regroup. Landing took place on the heavily populated planet of Eclipticum, and the Corazor family bureau station was taken by Minmatar shock troops. Panic seemed to grip the Empire as rumors of a third Minmatar-Thucker armada swept the domain region, causing Amar troops to begin mass executions of slaves in Sarum Prime. As the presence of just such a third invasion fleet was confirmed and fierce fighting erupted on Sarum Prime, the Imperial Navy appeared to rally and begin a mass force in Sarum Prime as an effort to make a stand. The Minmatar Republic, a state in stupefied confusion among the populace, gave way to chaotic rejoicing as the news of the invasion and the rescue of the Starkmanir overtook the disturbing news of the defections in the Ammatar Mandate. As it became clear that the Amar Empire was being beaten on multiple fronts by the Minmatar-Thucker invasion force, and the armadas were reported to be led by the legendary Elders, the celebration took on a frenzied, almost primal air. In the background of these celebrations, more sinister events were taking place as literally hundreds of government officials on every level of the Republic apparatus were assassinated in what was become known as the Purge. Every corpse left behind by the assassination had a dossier of evidence with it purporting to show the complicity of that victim with the Amar Empire's efforts to infiltrate, destabilize, and control the Republic. This deeply controversial aspect of the events in the Republic is a topic seldom spoken of since that day. As the Imperial Navy desperately assessed the movements and strengths of the invaders, military analysts discovered that decisive engagements had taken place in the Bleaklands derelict in Khador before the invasion fleets arrived at their primary targets. All prospects of successfully counterattacking in the Khorazor region collapsed, with an assault in the Andarub system leaving the Ministry of War Station, hub of the regional command, offline. Sorum Prime became the entire focus of the Amar Empire's defense, and the Imperial Navy continued to marshal its forces with that in mind. With the Concord neutralized and two empires seemingly engaged in a fight to the death, another empire decided to seize the opportunity to act. Thus was the Caldari invasion and the Gallente Federation launched. Even as the Amar Empire looked to rally its forces against the Minmatar invaders, the Caldari state invaded in force at the Kasigan borders crossing, using multiple jump portals as well as the Stargate. The Gallente Federation had no inkling that the task force numbering in the thousands of ships was approaching their border until the invasion force had crossed over. The total failure of the Federation early warning system, known as Tripwire, echoed many technological failures on this day, not least the ease in which Concord's defensive strategies were bypassed. Hard lessons were being learned on all sides, but the Federation was perhaps to be forced into learning the hardest ones of all. Within half an hour, the Caldari task force crossing the border entered into Luminaire, the home system of the Gallente Federation, an ancestral home system of the Caldari people. The Federation forces of sufficient strength to stop it could be no Federation forces of sufficient strength could be mustered in time. A Leviathan-class Titan and capitals from all of the Big 8 megacorporations spearheaded the invasion. The 1,000-strong forces proceeded to lock down the system and impose an unbreakable blockade, despite the best desperate efforts of the Federation Navy reinforcements. In a move that might be considered rather cursory, the Gallente Senate in Valor declared war on the Caldari Senate in an emergency session called by Senator Mentis Black. Panic erupted elsewhere in the Federation as the news of full-scale invasion by Caldari forces spread over the news feeds, urgently replacing accounts of the shocking events elsewhere in New Eden. Federation systems in the assumed path of the invasion suffered the greatest chaos, and transit systems were effectively paralyzed as citizens made to flee from the invaders. In the Caldari state, the news was equally shocking, but provoked a strange solemnity in the citizenry, as the Caldari people were now only now understanding what it meant to be at war again. The Gallente response to the invasion rested on two main planks. The first, resistance within Luminaire itself. The second, a counter-thrust by the Federation Navy. In respects of Luminaire, the Caldari Navy concentrated in maintaining the blockade, which it successfully held throughout the invasion, and on gaining control of Caldari Prime. Bloody as the invasion was, the horrors that would have attended the assault on densely populated Gallente Prime were not unleashed. Yet an assault on the populated planet was undertaken nonetheless, and the Caldari Navy's first move was a bombardment of Caldari Prime's defenses, a bombardment replete with irony in more ways than one. This is because the first Gallente-Caldari War pretty much started with Gallente orbitally bombarding Caldari Prime. As the Caldari Navy carried out its bombardment of the Caldari Prime defenses and established its superiority in Luminaire space beyond all doubt, the Federation Navy began its counter-thrust. Recognizing that a relief to Luminaire was unattainable, President Forotan authorized his forces to converge on Tirjiv, a system under Caldari control that stood astride a route leading to the heart of the state. As the Federation Navy hastened to its new objective, Caldari dropships were entering the atmosphere of Caldari Prime, and mechanized infantry were soon to be landing in the cities of Toville and Arcurio. Then, quite suddenly, President Soro Forotan called off the counterattack in Tirjiv. Within a quarter of the hour of that order, the Gallente Federation ceded control of Caldari Prime to the Caldari state, and Tybus Heth personally raised the state flag over the city of Arcurio. All of this is believed to have followed negotiations between Soro Forotan and Tybus Heth. While the precise details of these negotiations remain under diplomatic seal, it is alleged that Heth threatened to bomb Gallente population centers in Luminaire if Forotan did not accede to his demands. Hostilities on Caldari Prime came to an end at 1600 EST, the agreed truce coming to a full effect with all sides under ceasefire orders. The truce stipulating that the Caldari state claims the Caldari Prime alone, or for Caldari Prime alone, the bulk of the Navy forces began to withdraw almost immediately from Federation space. With the blockade of Luminaire lifted, the Federation Navy was also able to shadow the main Caldari forces while discovering the Leviathan-class Titan and its escorts remained in orbit around Caldari Prime. The humiliation of Soro, Forotan, and the Gallente Federation was achieved in a lightning strike typical of Caldari military doctrine, but elsewhere in New Eden, heavy space fighting has taken on the aspect of brutal grind. The Imperial Navy, rallying its force above the planet Mechios, Sorum Prime 3, engaged the enormous Mimitar Thucker Armada in orbit there with determined fury. By the time the Caldari and Gallente conflict had effectively been settled, the warfare above Mechios had become a grim stalemate. The Mimitar's Ragnarok doomsday weapon rendered impotent by the continuous stream of dropships laden with rescued slaves returning from Mechios. The breaking of this stalemate was perhaps the most astonishing event of the day, filled with hitherto unthinkable happenings. Even as the Caldari Navy withdrew from the state, the Amar Imperial Navy began to retreat from its position over Mechios. The Elder-led fleet disdained pursuit and held its own position as the Amar warped away. Perhaps assuming that the Imperial Navy to be broken, the Mimitar Thucker Task Force continued its work and redoubled its efforts to rescue the many slaves on Mechios. Perhaps the commanders of those invasion fleets were puzzled by the appearance of a lone squadron of only 13 Amar battleships over Mechios. But we will never know what they thought when they realized that their overviews were telling them about the identity of the lead Amar ship's commander. Jamil Sorum returned from the dead, leading a squadron of battleships against the entire Mimitar Thucker Armada. The impact of this news had on the New Eden cluster when it spread across the newsfeed was powerful enough. How it affected the men of that armada can only be conjectured. For analysis of telescopes, detector arrays, and fragments of holodata all point to one thing. A massive explosion above Mechios destroyed that entire invasion fleet. No ship survived. No one survived. With the fleet destroyed, the Mimitar forces on the surface of Mechios were doomed. Amar's retaliation was swift and merciless, crushing the invaders. The woes of Mechios were not ended, though, as vast quantities of wreckage from the battle and the destroyed armada began to fall into the atmosphere, wreaking havoc upon the planet. Jamil Sorum's victory here had come at a price. It's worth noting that it was actually above Jamil's birth city. I keep hitting that, I'm sorry. It was above Jamil's birth city, so I wonder how much of the fallout actually literally landed on her birth city. She mentions this in Empyrean Age. All right. Perceiving that the Amar had gained the upper hand by virtue of Jamil Sorum's possession of a weapon of terrible power, even if the nature of that weapon was not fully understood, the remaining Elder fleets elected to retreat from their positions in Corazor and Derelict. The Imperial Navy pursued with Jamil Sorum at their head. As the invaders became the hunted, an act of heroism by the defiant rebels allowed the retreating fleet to gain ground. Engaging the pursuing Amar forces in a desperate holding action, the Mimitar freedom fighters paid with their lives to buy precious time for their Mimitar and Thucker comrades. When the Imperial Navy once more took up the pursuit of the Elder fleets, no trace of the defiance remained. Appropriately enough, the final act of the day mirrored the first as Concord finally restored its rapid reaction capability and brought its networks back online, issuing a cease and desist order for all combatants. Concord designated the Mimitar Thucker fleets as mercenaries charged with crimes against humanity. They alone could be engaged at will. The Concord Assembly was not finished, however, as it invoked the Emergency Militia War Powers Act, providing for the four empires to form capsuleer militias. In this way were the State Protectorate, Federal Defense Union, Tribal Liberation Force, and 24th Imperial Crusade brought into being. While the Imperial Navy pursued the fleeing Elder fleet to the border of the Mimitar Republic, Jamil Sorum chose to heed the call of Concord and avoid a confrontation with the Republic itself. Pulling up the Amar forces at the Vard Stargate in the Ezra system, Elder fleet was allowed to pass through the Republic space without contest. The Republic fleet refusing to engage Mimitar Thucker Armada, no matter what criminal status Concord may have given it. As the dust of YC-110-610 began to settle, reports indicated that the Elders had rescued the entire Starkmanir population together with tens of thousands of other slaves. Amar Court Chamberlain Karsoth was found to be missing, with his once loyal Ministry of Eternal Order searching for him. As Jamil Soram's fleets began to return home, the Order of St. Tetramon took it upon itself to speak for the Amar, with the Grand Master's Horum declaring that, quote, God's children rejoice as his light returns home, and the light shall bring death and despair on his enemies. The aftermath of YC 110-610 in the Amar Empire included fearful reprisal. Oh, hold on. We can watch another video now.
Shockwaves have been...
Oh, no, that's the same one. Hold on. Shoot. Where's the full one? There it is.
The cycle of life and death was supposed to end with us. We were to be the start of a new age. A destiny of light. An Empyrean age.
There's the damaged Concord station.
Yet these tombs call out to us. All the heroes and villains vanquished within cry out at once, begging for justice.
There's the Minotaur attacking
We will
Concord?
fight for what we believe in. We will take a side, and our wrath will be furious.
Now, coming up here is Jamil. Right here. There's the super weapon, and that's what it does.
Welcome to the Empyrean Age.
So it turns out that that weapon system uses a rare material known as Isogen 5. And this kind of sets into motion what leads eventually towards the Apocrypha event. Okay? So let's keep going. The aftermath of YC 110-610 in the Amar Empire include fearful reprisals against those rebellious slaves that were left behind when the Elder Fleet retreated. The Keepstar Doomsday was inspired by it, yeah. Thousands upon thousands of rebels were killed by the Imperial Navy, used orbital bombardments to eliminate any holdouts. Military mobilization in Khanid Kingdom was suspended as it became clear that no incursions had taken place within its territory, and Khanid II calmed the population with an address to the kingdom. As Jamil Saram's return from the dead was absorbed, it met with mixed reactions within the Empire. Her apparent failure to properly observe the ritual of Shathal Sin, requiring the suicide of all remaining royal heirs on the ascension of the new emperor to the throne, constituted a religious crime. Yet counterbalancing this was the critical role Soram had assumed in halting and repelling the Mimitar invaders. This is a big thing. Like, when Jamil showed up, if she had just shown up, then she would have been like a heretic. You know, it would have been a problem. She was supposed to kill herself. The fact that she stopped the Elder Fleet that was being seen as unstoppable at the time is the thing that made her, like, be seen as being chosen by God, resurrected by God to be their leader. Her super weapon was on cooldown. While the Amar Empire recovered itself, reports of a new region of space opening up in the volume of space known as Black Rise were confirmed. Convinced of their strength, the Caldari state opened up the new region that they had secretly colonized and shown the Gallente Federation that yet another border with the state now existed. Concerned with affairs from the Federation, President Soro Forotan addressed the nation and revealed the treachery of Grand Admiral Avent and Etterer, promising to bring him justice and pledging to restore dignity with the Federation. Even though no formal militaries of the empires had ceased Even though the formal militaries of the empires had ceased belligerent operations, it soon became clear that the newly formed Capsuleer militias would lose no time in fighting across the territories on all four nations. Fleets of Capsuleers numbering in the hundreds clashed across Blackrise and Bleaklands in particular, with the State Protectorate and 24th Imperial Crusade allying against the Federal Defense Union and Tribal Liberation Force. Despite the misgivings of some in the Amar Empire, the royal heirs of Ardashir Kador, Khorazor, and Tashmerkon backed Jamil Soram's claim to the imperial throne, waiving their own rights to contest the succession by trial. In the absence of court chamberlain Artico Khorazor, the son of the last emperor Dorium II, appointed the interim chairman Hemerin. The Theology Council soon petitioned by court chamberlain Hemerin to approve the declaration of Jamil Soram as empress-elect. Moving swiftly, the Theology Council confirmed the validity of the nomination of Jamil Soram and authorized the Chamberlain to hold the imperial coronation as soon as possible. Yep. Even as the order of things seemed to be overturned by the Amar Empire, the Minmatar Republic was readjusting itself to a new reality. Having called an emergency session of the Republic Parliament, Sebester Chief and former Prime Minister Karen Midgeler called for elections to be held as soon as possible. Kainun, now a hero to many, asked Malatu Shakur to return to the Republic. Within a few days, Shakur did just that, and at the head of a large fleet, and was escorted by the Republic fleet to Matar, where he was welcomed by Karen Midgeler and the other tribal chiefs. Named as the unity candidate for the premiership of the Minmatar Republic, Malatu Shakur ran unopposed in an election that took place within a week of his return. The turnout was lowest on record for 30 years, but counting, although a formality was scheduled to take some days. As the terrible and fantastic month of June in the year of YC 110 drew to a close, the occupation of Caldari Prime acquired a settled and routine air. With the remaining Gallente military forces into hiding, the months ahead would see guerrilla warfare, mass imprisonment, and all of the problems of occupation on Caldari Prime. July opened with the official declaration of the election of Malatu Shakur as Prime Minister of the Minmatar Republic. Almost as if the pitch and pace of events from May through June could not be maintained by a fatigue of New Eden, the month saw little to astonish. The warring Capsuleer militias kept up a steady battle across contested systems, with some seeing occupations while others were relieved by militias supporting their sovereign powers. The Theology Council decided to recall various artifacts from the Bleaklands, now a region more dangerous than ever. It was when the Blood Raiders roamed its spaceways. Street violence was a minor theme of the month, as Federation citizens gave vent to feelings of anger and humiliation in the wake of the Caldari invasion and occupation of Caldari Prime. In the Republic, too, gangs of youths roamed, and the idolatry of Shakur and the tragic defiance as an excuse to vent their feelings. Perhaps the whole cluster was gripped by the need to express pent-up anger. Even the Mortis Legion mercenary company experienced a surge in recruitment. August saw the idolatry of Malatu Shakur result in the tragedy as a pair of foolish youths blinded themselves in imitation of the old white-eyed hero. Elsewhere in the Republic, many Minmatar were so inspired by the appearance of the legendary elders that they set out as pilgrims to the Great Wildlands, where Minmatar Thucker fleets were believed to have gone. At least one such convoy was to go missing in the course of a month. Huala's system became the focus of warfare between the 24th Imperial Crusade and the Tribal Liberation Force. As the Amar searched for a missing Amatar scientist, Dresden Karel, believed shot down in the system at the end of July, Carnell was eventually found and extracted, and the incident demonstrated the usefulness of the militias to the empires in achieving delicate objectives. The occupation of Caldari Prime took a turn for the worse, as Gallente resistance fighters turned into bombings and used the tactics of guerrilla insurgency in the face of well-equipped and large Caldari military. The death toll rose steadily throughout the month, which ended in the grim revelation of a secret prison set up by the Caldari occupation force in an abandoned underwater arcology. September got underway with a building backlash against the Federation military erupting into plain sight, as an emergency summit held in Valour became the focal point of the Gallente criticism of the Navy performance during the Caldari invasion. Acting to head the anger of citizens across the Federation before it destabilized his government further, President Soro Foroten announced the formation of a new division within the FIO, the Special Departments of Internal Investigations and Federal Security, headed by Senator Mentis Black, one-time bitter rival of Soro Foroten but undoubted patriot. With this rather unwieldy name and logo consisting of a plain black Federation eagle, the new organization soon became known as the Black Eagles. The Minmatar Republic saw subtle but definite change in the inauguration of President Minister Malatu Shakur as Sanmatar of the Minmatar people. a title resurrected from the days of the Minmatar Empire. The Sammatar was de facto head of state in the old empire, and with the role of mediating between the tribes and guiding the nation as a whole. The transformation of this office of prime minister into something harkening back to the tribal times met with a mixed reaction within the Republic and beyond. In the Caldari state, Tybus Heth's program of reforms had been in place long enough for an independent audit to assess them and give positive reports on the effects. A cautious reaction to this outside of the state was little interest to state citizens, who enthusiastically backed the Heth program. The Amar Empire's Chamberlain Hemarin announced the coronation of Jamil Sorum for the 26th of September, and despite much preparation, it was later postponed until the first week of October. As he talks about this, all I think of is this is the song "Strange Things Are Happening," confirming the first week of October was the time of rejoicing for the Amar Empire as Jamil Sorum was crowned Empress Jamil I in the Cathedral of Saint Kuria in the Prophet on Amar Prime. Oh, hold on. There's a video for that one.
On a momentous day that shall be honored for time everlasting, our glorious empire at last heralded the coronation of Her Majesty Empress Jamil. As billions of faithful beheld a scene of unprecedented imperial might, she arrived with her guardians to announce the dawn of a new reclaiming. The legacy of her reign began with a decree to every soul of New Eden.
I am the harbinger of hope. I am the sword of the righteous. And to all who hear my words, I say this. What you give to this empire, I shall give back unto you.
Thank you. All right, so that was the coronation of Jamil Sorum, and yeah. The first coronation proclamations followed, confirming Merimith Sorum as the new royal heir of House Sorum and appointing Sorum House Steward Pomik Haromi as Empress Jamil's new court chamberlain. The Ministry of Internal Order released the footage of the coronation across the Empire so that all of the Empress's subjects could watch the awe-inspiring event. All right, I'm going to look in Discord real quick, and I'm also going to put on an ad really quick. Ha-ha! Okay. All right. So. No, let's see, where was I? Where were we? The Chief Executive Panel of the Caldari State got on with more mundane affairs as it established a reform guidance board to oversee the provost reforms of the Caldari State in the absence of sick leave of Caldari Providence Director COO Janice Bravor. November was to demonstrate just how mutable the politics of New Eden cluster had become, even in relatively small matters such as the involvement of royal heirs Uriam Kador and Giannis Ardashapur in the campaigns of the 24th Imperial Crusade, or the strange corporate scandals that collapsed the Caldari State's Reform Guidance Board. Events seemed to pile up with new urgency. Perhaps after YC 110-610, even at 5 months removed, people believed that almost anything could spark tumultuous change. Shocking as the Khador incursion was, perhaps it was not quite so startling as it once would have been. Alert watchers of the interstellar events might have felt something was in the wind when a 200-strong Amar fleet was in the Tashmerkon region, and the ruling house of that vast demons declared that they had no knowledge of the fleet nor any Imperial Navy exercises in their territory. The astute have felt something unusual was definitely afoot when a similarly sized force was detected in the Iridia region. It was surely a surprise, however, when this fleet of Amar warships was sighted crossing into the Gallente Federation space, reportedly under the orders of Amar Royal Heir Uriam Khador. The fleet made for Radilos system and, upon arrival there, engaged in heavy fighting with the Gallente Defense Forces. As news of the incursion was confirmed, the Imperial Navy declared the fleet rogue, acting without sanction of the Ministry of War and without representing the Amar Empire.
Wrapping up financial news, commodity prices fell on profit-taking for trading runs, but the manufacturing sector rallied on economic data showing a sharp increase in orders for Starship components. Meanwhile, an increase in mining yield for the period indicates...
We have a breaking story. This is live footage of the Radalos border in Solitude, where Imperial Navy warships have just crossed... wait, correction. We have reports now that those ships belong to the Amarian Royal Heir Uriam Khador, not the Imperial...
Whoa!
They've opened fire.
I don't believe it.
Amarian Heir Uriam Khador has just launched a personal invasion of Federation space, which just months ago was invaded by... I'm sorry, we're getting more footage now.
Okay, heavy fighting is underway between forces in... Look!
Military experts are calling this a sinusoidal field.
Hundreds, maybe thousands of ships are coming through.
This is a massive Federation counterattack. The Galentians are fighting back with everything they've got.
Look, a Federation Titan has just come through.
There's no escaping them now.
Cool. Whatever the Khador plan may have been, and the reason for the attack does remain obscure still, it was thwarted by a massive Federation counterattack as an Erebus-class Titan and a company Federation Navy forces moved to destroy the invading fleet. Outnumbered by at least 4-1 and sustaining heavy losses, the Khador began to retreat immediately. Commanding the counterattack, Federation Grand Admiral Attison Ranchel declared that the Khador fleet would not be allowed to return to Amar territory. Whether some surviving elements did eventually limp back or not, the Grand Admiral's promise was substantially made good, and the Gallente Federation was able to claim a decisive victory. The penalty for miscalculating so badly was initially a reprimand for Uriam Khador by the Empress Jamil I, and the confiscation of what remained of the House Khador fleet. The last caused some comment, and was noted that the Empress appeared to be bringing back into force the old edict of Emperor Hadrian VII against military fleet independence of the Imperial Navy. In the Gallente Federation, President Soro Forotan declared the Navy ready to protect the Federation with terrible force and suggested that further action might be forthcoming. So this is actually really important. So basically, each of the royal heirs has their own navy, in theory. But in the past, Hadrian, which was one of them, he ruled for 200 years before the events of EVE Online, he had a decree that basically said that the heirs were not allowed to have their own navy anymore. But most people kind of ignored that. But this move made it so that Jamil basically began to enforce it more and more. This is worth noting because this kind of gets reflected by Empress Kattis, who then brings out the principle of two swords, about how the Empress is both the leader of the military and of spiritual matters, and then proceeding to basically assign territory to the different empire houses and charge them with their own defense, effectively undoing the Hadrian decree. But that was later. That was 2018. This is Jamil. It was not too much later in November when further action materialized as the Federation Navy fleet moved into force across the Iridia border. With Amar Navy vessels monitoring their movements but not moving to intercept, the 100-strong fleet headed to Khador Prime. The Federation Navy forces were able to overwhelm what was left of the Khador Defense Fleet and sent boarding troops into the Khador Family Bureau station in orbit of Khador Prime Khador Prime 1. Shortly thereafter, the Federation fleet withdrew, its mission apparently successful, and departed Khador Prime, heading to the Gallente Federation with no more interference from the Imperial Navy than before. Later that day, President Soroforoten addressed the Federation to announce the capture of traitor Grand Admiral Avent Enterer. It transpired that the extraction of the renegade Federation officer was the primary goal of the operation in Khador Prime, and with this, the dissolution of the Khador fleet. The Federation considered the matter of the Khador incursion closed. For its part, the Amar Empire maintained an inscrutable silence throughout the affair. Empress Jamil I's next public declaration concerned the Amatar Mandate, which she placed under the direct authority of royal heir Giannis Ardashir. December opened with the Federation citizenry rallying enthusiastically behind their government and military in the wake of recent defensive and offensive operations, not to mention the capture of the reviled Avent Enterer. In contrast, the Caldari state was racked by uncertainty about its economic, and occupation of Caldari Prime continued to be problematic, with the Gallente resistance found to be receiving substantial off-world support. The Amar Empire was to see further political developments as the Empress appointed Turco Corazor to post of Imperial Chancellor, and Giannis Ardashir began to take control of the Amatar Mandate, sweeping out the failed Amatar nobility and placing his own vassals in positions of authority. Unusual news of large-scale operations carried out. By the way, this is important because Ardashir eventually promoting one of the Amatar governors to holder status, I think it was one of the things that first triggered Chakade to start like causing a fuss, and he was eventually revealed to be the EOM infiltrator and attacked the planet with the Doomsday, the dread attacks with the final attack with the Doomsdays on the planet of, I don't know, somebody will say it in chat or not, whatever. The Amar Empire was to see further political developments as the Empress, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Unusual news of large-scale operations carried out against the Blood Raider Covenant by the Royal Khanid Navy led to even more astonishing revelation. After intense fighting and massive losses on both sides, the Khanid Kingdom was able to send renegade ex-Chamberlain Dachuta Karsoth into chains to its Amar allies. So now, Karsoth, who is the guy who kind of was trying to take over the Amar before Jamil showed up, and the admiral that was connected to the Khador attack, both of them are now captured. Okay. Unusual news. Blah, blah, blah. The final days saw the year of remarkable events, but one of these towered above all the others. Nope. Is that it? No. The Khanid Kingdom, yeah. Empress, her deep gratitude to King Khanid II and the Khanid Kingdom and Empire seemed closer than ever before. The final days of the year saw three remarkable events, but one of these towered above all the others. On the 25th day of December, YC-110, wow, Christmas, the traitors Envent Entur and Doka Karsoth were executed by their respective governments. The heretic and former Chamberlain was extraordinarily permitted to the small dignity of an execution held behind closed doors. In this, perhaps Jamil Sorum thought to send a message. In the Gallente Federation, the renegade Federation Navy officer was put to death in a quite different fashion. Envent Entur was publicly executed in the most grotesque fashion that the Federation could devise, as a sound-sensitive chemical agent disrupted the very cells of his body in response to the roars of the watching crowd. The contrast between these executions was not lost on anyone. So that is a critical event right there, okay? So what they did was, in order to execute this dude, they put him on stage, and then they gave him this chemical that responds to a specific way, like frequency of sound. And then they created these, like, they had these speakers that like took in the sound and converted it to the exact frequency that was needed to trigger it. And then the crowd like yelled and cheered and all that stuff, and that caused the sound that caused him to burst into flames and self-immolate as everybody watched. This was something that was so considered to be so controversially cruel in the Gallente Federation that a then somewhat young senator by the name, actually probably not, I don't know if he was young at the time, but a senator by the name of Belleron put forth a bill to end this kind of gratuitous execution. He also, at about the same time, tried to get rid of Mentis Black and blah, 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 blah. And he's a guy who we now know is basically one of the biggest outspoken critics of Celis Agard. While President Forotan may have considered his work of the day done, the Empress of Amar did not. For following the execution of Karsoth, she made a declaration that was so unexpected that it could hardly be made more fitting finale for the year of so many unexpected events. By imperial decree, Empress Jamil I ordered the emancipation of all slaves of the 9th generation and upward, with the additional emancipation of all slaves working as academics or theologians. Dominating the remainder of the year, the Emancipation Edict's most immediate effect was to provoke rejoicing among former slaves. Its longer-term effects remain to be seen, but as a sign of the ability of Empress Jamil I to make radical change, it cannot be understated. YC 111. This one is so crazy, it's broken down into months. With New Eden still absorbing the implications of Empress Jamil I's emancipation of all slaves of the 9th generation and upward, New Year brought news of some holders in outlying regions of the Amar Empire refusing to comply with the imperial decree on slave release. While hundreds of millions of slaves had been or were in the process of being released following the Empress's proclamation, holders controlling several million slaves in the systems in Aridia and Genesis regions defied the edict and demanded the Theology Council make a ruling on the religious legality of the order. Some Reclarance holders also went so far as to appeal to the Speaker of Truth, in itself suggesting that this was for them a direct dispute with Empress Jamil I. The hopes of the so-called Refusard holders were to be dashed when the Theology Council swiftly condemned them and called on all imperial subjects to enforce the will of Empress Jamil I. The Theology Council's trenchant ruling reaffirmed the ancient doctrine that the word of the Empress is the word of God, and the will of the Empress is the will of God, and warned of harsh punishments for those continuing to refuse the edict. Empire-wide transmission of the Council's ruling and news that the Speaker of Truth declined to intervene led to widespread collapse of the Refusards, with many immediately complying and repenting before officials of the Imperial Chancellor. However, several holders on several planets of Aridia region, known for its plethora of hardline cults and ultra-Orthodox sects, maintained their refusal to release slaves under the terms of the edict, citing religious justification. Chancellor Corazor instructed a fleet seconded to the Chancellery to enforce an edict using all means necessary. It is known that the enforcement fleet subjected several Refusard holders' estates and associated targets to heavy bombardment from orbit. The numerous locations were assaulted by the Chancellery troops. In all, these actions resulted in the seizure of over 15 million slaves who were subsequently released in line with the Emancipation Proclamation. The treatments of most I don't know these words, was harsh indeed, with the leaders summarily executed and their followers and families reduced to slavery for generations. Others who less dramatically sought to evade the edict's terms were also firmly dealt with, as holders using subterfuge and fraud to keep their 9th generation slaves were pursued by the Ministry of Internal Order. In a notable case, the wealthy slaveholder Adash Korta, holder of Dakba and owner of something over 500,000 slaves, was found to have altered the genealogical records of his stock, thereby hiding the 9th generation and above status of approximately 100,000 slaves. The Theology Council made an example of Korta, condemning him into slavery, stripping his family of noble ranks, and distributing his assets between the new holders of Dakba and other holders. Reactions to the Emancipation Edict across New Eden was somewhat mixed. The Caldari state was muted in its reactions, but clearly many saw it as an opportunity to ease old tensions between the Caldari, legally and culturally opposed to slavery, and the Amar over the issue. In the Gallente Federation, many welcomed the release of hundreds of millions of slaves, although concerns were expressed by some politicians that it could result in a new influx of refugees to Gallente regions. The Mimitar diaspora of the Federation was more skeptical as to the quality of Empress Jamil I's mercy. This view found more than an echo in the response from the Mimitar Republic, where Samatar Malatushakor warned of Amar treachery, even as he welcomed millions of slaves home to the Mimitar worlds. Reactions to the widely publicized executions of Grand Admiral Advent Entur and former Amar Court Chamberlain Karsoth at the end of the last year continued for some time. Most stringent in their criticism was the very public grotesque method of cellular immolation by the Federation to put to death the traitor Entur was the servant sisters of Eve, calling it barbaric and inhumane, and urging the method to be banned. The Federation government made no response to this, but many Gallente citizens defended the public execution with the immolation methods. Pro-war rallies saw many thousands backing the Federation's approach, though their citizens expressed quiet reservations. In contrast, reactions were private. Almost dignified execution of Karsoth were few. However, the Amar Imperial Navy observers report the Royal Khanid Navy operations against the Blood Raider Covenant had netted Karsoth, told of the heavy costs on both sides. So once again, like, this isn't mentioned here, probably because at that point he was just a bit actor, but the guy who was promoting this within the Federation was, what's his name? Belleron. I always remember it by the Belleron bill. Early in January, in another bit of initiative from the Amar Empire, Empress Jamil I announced a multi-trillion ISK package of investment into the Caldari state. The Caldari Amar Economic Stimulus Agreement, CAESA, was negotiated with the assistance of Tashmerkan family and the Khanid Kingdom, but reactions within the empire were mixed. While the more liberal Tashmerkan and Khorazor hailed the investment package, religious conservatives and Amar business leaders expressed concerns of such investment which should more properly be aimed at Amar businesses. In the Caldari state, reactions were almost entirely favorable, with Executor Tibus Heth welcoming the package and pledging that the Amar Empire would receive a profitable return on the investment. In a development related to the emancipation, the Caldari Providence Directorate announced that it would be making available a number of experienced trainers for secondment within the Amar Empire to train former slaves who choose to take up residence there. Other developments across New Eden as the year began included increased levels of fighting between the militias in the war zone, even as the Caldari Navy Logistics Command published a report detailing the costs of occupying Caldari Prime. In the scale of the cost of both an ISK material and morale among the occupying troops came as a surprise to some, as the liberal faction megacorporation Hasiota used the occasion of debate on the report of the chief executive panel to criticize the military policies of the state executor Tibus Heth. While this criticism elected some support, the Patriot Bloc corporations, in particular Lydai, supported Heth's policies vigorously. Perhaps more ominous for Heth than the almost expected criticism from the liberals was the silence from the practical faction corporations. Certainly, the grim tally set out from the report had certainly caused disquiet among the profit-conscious Caldari megacorporations. Another significant development in the Caldari state concerning the Ishikoni Corporation. Without a CEO since the Malakan disaster in May of YC-110, the megacorporation's long search for a new chief executive, with several candidates having fallen by the wayside in the previous year, it emerged the Ishikoni board was seriously considering two leading contenders. Menz Repala, CEO of Ishikoni Watch and friend to the late Ortro Guryushi, and Soisen Akilala, CEO of Ishikoni mining subsidiary Mindrill. With both candidates being chief executives within the Ishikoni family of corporations and appealing to different tendencies within the Ishikoni board, the competition between the two was expected to be close. In the Minmatar Republic, an upsurge in interest in the history of the Minmatar and the tribes were almost interestingly manifested in a great increase for enthusiasm in the traditional cuisine of the Minmatar people. The Minmatar Native Fresh Foods Corporation reported a rise in sales of traditional ingredients and recipe books, attributing the cost-effective of traditional cuisines as well as the attraction of eating like Minmatar. The Independent Gaming Commission announced its 6th Alliance tournament for Capsuleers would begin at the end of the month, in a move that was perhaps designed to play on patriotic feelings within the core empires and thereby increase viewing figures. The IGC announced that the teams of the 4 militias would be accepted into the qualifying rounds of the tournament. In this event, none of the militia teams progressed past the qualifiers into the final rounds, perhaps unable to score sufficiently against seasoned and well-equipped Capsuleer Alliances squads despite some individual wins. February. The 6th Alliance tournament came to an end in February, with Pandemic Legion defeating RUR Alliance in a thrilling final match between the latter's Caracal Navy Issues and Abaddon team and Pandemic Vexer Navy Issue and Minmatar Command Ship Squad. Having already defeated and defending the champions of Evoke Alliance in the semifinals, their victory in the final saw Pandemic Legion crowned Alliance champions for the first time after a history of strong showings in previous tournaments. The continuing war with the Gallente Federation occupation of Caldari Prime continued to be sources of contention throughout the month. The Wiakomi Peace Corps, the security arm of the Patriot faction, Wiakomi Corporation, announced that it was sending an additional full brigade of troops to take part in the occupation of the Caldari's original homeworld. This highlighted the involvement of a number of corporate security troops forces belonging to mega corporations such as Kalikiota, Laidai Corporation, and Wiakomi, along Caldari Navy Marines and Provost troops of the Caldari Prime, or on Caldari Prime. The Wiakomi deployment was considered to mark a shift away from such corporate forces working mainly as a defense force around assets seized by mega corporations towards being contract troops answering to the Caldari provisional government on the planet. While the Patriot corporations such as Wiakomi continued to be unstinging in their support of the occupation and general war effort, unstinting in their support of the occupation and general war effort, Ishikone Watch CEO Menz Repala spoke out on the subject of occupation in the political talk show Games of State. Referring to the recent reports of the cost of the occupation, Repala charged that the occupation was, quote, a logistical nightmare, draining the resources of the state, end quote. The former Navy captain went on to point out that the Caldari Navy was conceived and organized as a defensive force that could not sustain an offensive of the scope and length of the occupation. I don't know why. The offense of the scope and length of the occupation and the continuing war against the Gallente Federation. With his candidacy for the Ishikone Corporation chief executive seat now well known, Repala also spoke of the importance of solving problems of interest of employees of the state itself, emphasizing that this has been the approach of the late Ishikone CEO Ortro Goriushi. Menz Repala has also been critical of the Caldari offensive in Verge Vendor, as his remarks on Games of State and the campaign in the region swiftly resulted in skyrocketing insurance and shipping rates, driving many freight companies and independent pilots away from the region. In other shipping news, the crippled Iteron-class industrial vessel was discovered. A crippled Iteron-class industrial vessel was discovered burned out in space, with all hands lost in the Castlemon system Essence region. Mystery surrounding the vessel's fate and purposes, with no public records of its cargo or destination available, until a Federation Navy statement was issued confirming the ship had been contracted by the Navy to relocate military equipment. This statement also revealed that an investigation had concluded that the ship had been destroyed by demolition charges set inside of the vessel after its cargo had been stolen. The Federation Navy blamed the Caldari for this raid, but questions were raised as to why there had been no naval escort. Mine Drill CEOs Sayosin Okalala, a candidate for the Ishikone CEO spot, used an appearance on This Is the State to respond to fellow candidate Menz Repala's remarks on the occupation of Caldari Prime and the course of the war against the Gallente Federation. Okalala suggested that the report on the costs of occupation was narrowly focused and did not balance the costs against the gains. The Mine Drill CEO also congratulated the State Protectorate for its efforts in the Verge Vendor and expressed support for the approach of State Executor Titus Heth with regard to the Amar Empire and the economic agreement with them. His last remarks were perhaps a response to criticism within the state over an agreement between the mining conglomerate Dulcio Foundry and the state and region bank securing 50 billion ISK of financing for the Amar Corporation. What's up, Eagle Firefly? Heightened at this time of contentious activity between the Caldari Corporation seemed to be a feature of this month's events, with Hasiota Corporation walking out of negotiations with Zanu over a supply contract, Mine Drill and Top Down Retail entering into partnership to develop new mining technology, and the Caldari Business Tribunal investigating raiding Ishikone Corporation officers in Aimomo system. The last incident proved to be embarrassing for the Caldari Providence Directorate, which had prompted the CBT to take the action and sent its own troops to participate in the investigators' raid. Within the day, Ishikone Watch made over 100 arrests among Ishikone personnel on charges of aiding piracy and corporate corruption throughout the Maito constellation. Apparently, the result of long-standing Watch investigation and surveillance operation, the Ishikone security arm was forced to make its move prematurely when the CBT Provost raid interrupted its surveillance and alerted some of the targets of their operation. The Watch stated that almost 50 subjects had eluded capture, among some of them the worst offenders. When the Caldari Providence Directorate suit against Ishikone Corporation went to the Tribunal Regional Court, it was dismissed, vindicating the position of Ishikone and leaving the provosts sorely disappointed. Ishikone chose to leave the matter there, refraining from exercising its option to countersuit over the premature raid and disruption to its businesses and that of Ishikone Watch's surveillance operations. More good press for Ishikone Watch CEO's Men's Repola came when he intervened in the dispute between Hasiota and Zenu to bring about a return to negotiations between the two corporations. Nice. Good to see you. In the Amar Empire, news of the arrest of the Amatar Fleet General, Admiral Aikawarazu in the orders of Amar Royal Heirs Giannis Ardashipur shocked many across the Amatar Mandate. The charges against Admiral Aro were listed as dereliction of duty, failure to prevent mutiny, and treason. Speaking about his decision to order the arrest over 6 months after the Elder invasion exposed serious deficiencies in the Amatar fleet and sparked widespread defections from its ranks, Giannis Ardashipur noted that, quote, as one in charge of the Grand Admiral Aro is totally responsible for the failures and actions of his men, end quote. The action caused much disquiet amongst the ranks of the Amatar fleet, with many fearing a general purge. On this, the royal heir would only say that he had yet to decide how deep the ineptitude of the fleet runs. In Amar itself, the charismatic former slave and cleric of the Salvation Church of Blessed Servitude, Abel Jarek, declared the intention to lead a salvation crusade from Amar to Pator, home system of the Mimitar. Accompanied by the 214th Mimitar former slaves, Jarek left Amar aboard a chartered transport and began to tour around Amar systems, picking up former slaves to take part in the crusade. The Salvation Crusade ships were soon preparing to cross into Mimitar space, where they would have left behind their House Sorum security escort, the presence of which was a apparent sign of favor from the House Sorum family. Crossing into Mimitar space towards the middle of February, Abel Jarek's small fleet of ships encountered several hostile vessels in the Aga system, which is, by the way, one of the most hotly contested systems right now in the Amar Mimitar war zone. Mostly consisting of attack frigates of the Rifter class, the hostile fleet ordered the Salvation Crusaders to turn back into Amar space after halting Jarek's ship with warp disruptors. Abel Jarek is believed to have immediately refused the order, but the standoff was prevented from descending into deadly violence by the arrival of Caldari mercenaries in several powerful ships, including 3 Cerberus-class missile cruisers and 2 Rook-class electronic warfare cruisers. These mercenaries jammed the Mimitar frigates and escorted the Salvation Crusaders into their journey to the Pator system. Arriving in the Mimitar home system, Jarek and his followers landed in Mitar and set up camp in the largest refugee holding zone in the Mimitar war zone. Well, that's weird, right? Oh, this is saying it's going to do ads. We're going to do ads. Amar Victor. Let's see. Ever since the news of the crusade had reached the Mimitar Republic, there had been much controversy as to the strong feelings of apathy as evidenced by the unofficial attempt to halt Jarek at the border. However, as returning slaves claiming Republic citizenship, Jarek and his followers could not be stopped by the Mimitar government despite their outrage at arrival and plans to build an Amar chapel in the refugee camp caused. Okay. This outrage manifested itself in a number of violent arguments and minor scuffles when Jarek's followers ventured into the main camp to preach. This hostility culminated in a major escalation when several hundred strong troops of rioters, apparently led by masked men directing the crowd's action, broke into the Salvation Crusade compound and burned their Amar chapel down. The violence resulted in numerous injuries among Jarek's followers, but there were no deaths. Complaints from the local police and fire services took too long to arrive or dismissed by the Matar authorities. For his part, Abel Jarek was defiant and vowed to continue to spread the word of God among the Mimitar. This is just the events of YC1. We're now on the events of YC111 on the Universe portal. We're in February. Other problems in the Mimitar Republic emerged in late February with Adonis Medical, a medical and aid charity run by the Adonis Foundation, warning that food supplies to the Republic were at risk due to shortage in Verge Vendor region caused by the ongoing Caldari offensive and consequent contraction of shipping volumes. Added to this was the increased tension over the issue of land in the Mimitar Republic caused by a rising immigration population and, in particular, the return of the Nefender and Starkmanir tribe, with members of both tribes pressing claims to ancestral lands disputed to other parties or held by the Mimitar government. In their absence, a considerable increase in land disputes was reported by the Mimitar Land and Estates Agency Urban Management. All right. That's February. March. We're getting there. We're almost to the end of today. March YC 111 was to be dominated by one event and its aftermath above all others. The Sylian disaster. In itself, what happened in Sylian was one catastrophic effect of a much more profound and widespread phenomena. The emergence of unstable wormholes across New Eden cluster. The long-term effects of that emergence can only be guessed at, but it was Sylian, with an almost inconceivable human tragedy that gripped New Eden before the wider impact of the events of that day began to be comprehended. Before Sylian, however, the month began with the affairs of the empires playing out much as they had done in previous weeks. The Minmatar Republic continued pressures in the troubled polity led to charges of political stasis between being leveled at Samatar Balatushakor amid chaotic and fractious scenes in the Republic Parliament. An attempted amendment on financial motion that attacked the Samatar's assumption of power was heavily defeated by a majority of the members present, but served as an indication of increasing disquiet at the uncertain political situation. Hey! The Samatar may have felt that his call after the assembly of the 7 tribes of Minmatar answered any such charges had been aired during the turbulent parliamentary session. This was swiftly followed by a stunning political development as the Samatar and Thucker chief Einar Abel were able to jointly announce that the Thucker tribe, long estranged from the other tribes, was to join the Minmatar Republic with full autonomy in the Great Wildlands. An emotional Malatushakor was able to declare that the 7 tribes of Matar were once more unified. The details of this union and the changing political structure of the Minmatar Republic, now being spoke of as the Tribal Republic, were clearly to be a major agenda item in the tribal assembly that Shakor had called only days before. I feel like I need to do this. This is Malatushakor.
Let me tell you who we are. We have a legacy. A legacy that shaped us. A legacy that we've built. We united on this mother world. We rose together as the 7 tribes. One people forging our future. They came to destroy it. They tried to break us, divide us, to scatter the tribes. But we fought back. We rose as brothers and sisters, seizing victory from the vile chains we broke. And today we stand. We stand as the 7 tribes of Matar. We stand as Minmatar.
Such a good video. All right. Where were we? All right. In the Gallente Federation. Here we go. In the Gallente Federation, Intaki Senator Suvio Belleron proposed a ban on public executions following the Inter execution. Senator Belleron condemned the execution as a shameful and barbaric spectacle. Hey! 07, thank you for the new supporter, DFW Sleepy Pills. Thank you so much for that. All right. Senator Belleron condemned the execution as, quote, a shameful and barbaric spectacle, end quote, when introducing his bill. Others criticized Belleron and noted that the scale of the Eteror's treason. The bill was effectively... This other person, by the way, is the same Yinmei person that keeps calling out Belleron to this day. I can't remember her name right now. In the Black Rise region, scenes of the intense warfare between the Gallente Federation and Caldari State. The Calakiota Corporation announced a large-scale surveying program aimed at locating resources and potential colonization sites in the region. This was soon followed by announcements from Lidai for development in Black Rise and clear positioning by Wiakomi and Sukavesta for future Black Rise development. In the Amatar Mandate, Grand Admiral Ankar Aro, former head of the Amatar fleet, pled guilty to charges of dereliction of duty and treason and was sentenced to death by a panel of the Theology Council justices headed by Royal Heir Giannis Adashapur. In addition, Admiral Aro's family was ordered to be enslaved. There was some protest as to the severity of the sentence, but Ankar Aro himself remained impassive, and there was an order that he was led from the courtroom to await execution a week later. Okay, so that is the story up to the Salian disaster. Today, we were talking about basically the events of the Empyrean Age, the events that led to the formation of faction warfare, and the tensions therein. And I can tell by chat that many of you agree that there is quite a few echoes of the past in what is happening now. And I hope that everyone found this useful to properly interpret the things from the past, or the things that are happening now, by being able to recognize the names, places, and events that are happening at this critical time. Okay, so barring some craziness, tomorrow we will begin with the Salian disaster and also known as the Apocrypha event. In the meantime, let me check to make sure I don't have any other videos. Nope, that's it. I'll end this by teasing the Apocrypha trailer. So some things to think about, okay? The events that we saw today were took place basically just after the rise of the rogue drones and the opening of the drone lands, I believe. Maybe not immediately after, but we can see even at the very beginning they're still responding to the drone lands, and there's that mysterious light. I think that mysterious light is Jamil using the super weapon for the first time, but I'm not 100% sure. But it's important to note that due to the events of this means that the other was already able to communicate, or at least, able to communicate into this area of space. I've long since believed that the other helps the rogue drones figure out stuff. And I think that it's like this idea of like the code area inquiry and this whole incident with the rogue drones is yet another key. But like I said, when we talked about it, like that's a whole nother kettle of fish for us to dig into. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you learned something, let me know. If you want me to dig into anything in particular, please put something in the comments. If I missed anything important, please put it in the comments. And I guess the question of the day is like, actually, this is a good question. I've been meaning to do like the top 10 villains of EVE Online, right? You know, like as both races and individual characters. So I just kind of want to get an idea of a quick poll underneath here. So in the comments below, tell me who is your favorite EVE Online bad guy right now. And then also, we have crossed the 5K question thing, or 5K subs, so thank you guys for that. But I also didn't receive a whole bunch of, I didn't receive questions, so I don't know if that means that people aren't interested or whatever, so I'm going to keep on keeping on. Yeah, characters from lore only, no players. Yeah. Unless that person has been, like, actually done something within the lore, right? I don't think any players have done anything in the lore that could be considered villainous. I don't think. At any rate, yeah, I'd just be interested. You know, there's Zoria, there's Sancha, there's all the pirate leaders. There's Karsoth, there's Phallic Grange, there's the Other. There's all kinds of different choices. Omir, Bloody Omir, the head of the Blood Raiders. Yeah, that he's out there. All right, but let's see. Anything else to cover before we wrap things up? Is it time to wrap things up? I mean, you know, it's close enough. Who's the black guy, no soul space baby? That's the Other. I do, well, players are I mean, spoiler alert, but the whole point of the video is that Capsuleers are the #1 villain. But so looks like we've got some more work to do. So you know, if you guys are interested in helping out with the Federation, or just joining in and helping us maximize player engagement with EVE Online, the Convocation of Empyreans is recruiting. Be gentle to our recruiters, though. We're kind of overwhelming them. And speaking of overwhelming, apparently now my account is now subscribed thanks to you guys. So many of you guys have now subscribed to my account that it is subscribed until 2030. Actually, it's almost 2031. One more person and it's 2031. So that's nuts. I don't need 2,800 days of game time. So the code down below is not my code. Okay, the link down below for the code actually sends you to a random person's link chosen from among the officers and members and stuff like that within the Convocation of Empyreans, and a few that aren't in the Convocation of Empyreans that make like the show work and that help out and all that stuff. So if you do need to use a buddy code to get 1,000,000 free SP, which is about 40 days of free training, make sure to use that link, and it helps out the Convocation broadly. Other than that, let's see. Merch. I got this mug. I need to go. I'm going to buy that EVE Universe mug. And oh yeah, I want to thank. Let's see. Let's look at the supporters. Right there's supporters here. Where was it? Yeah, Ganai gifting a membership. DFW Sleepy Pills coming in with a membership of their own. I thought there was something else, but maybe that was it, and that's great. I mean, that's still great. I appreciate it, you guys. These are the things that kind of make this whole thing work, right? Gonna hit up the Discord when I get to the house. Excellent. Also, it should make it so that you can get into the supporters channel. If for some reason you can't, hit me up, because either I can help you figure it out, or I might need to do it manually. It's still kind of a mess. But yeah, so all of the things that I was reading from today is from the universe.eveonline.com portal. But if you want to get more information about the lore, I have made my own lore portal with a bunch of the information kind of collated in different ways. On our Notion page, which is like a wiki. Today I'm going to give my thanks to Quinn Rhodes. Quinn Rhodes, you know, Adoran Robotics is a tricky fella, right? You know, it's a faction warfare. Unlike Mauro, you know, Adoran Robotics is supposed to be getting something done. And it has a lot of military. So it's always been hard for us to keep a military leader. And through the void, you know, as we've kind of split off and sent you know, Hungary and them to go do like more advanced stuff while we focused on newbie focused stuff, you know, it kind of left us without military command for a little while. And Quinn has definitely stepped up and done a great job. He's a great leader. He's a good dude, and I like hanging out with him. Thank you very much. And he also reminds me to brush my teeth, which is super handy. All right. And if you want to fly with him, join Adoran Robotics. Without further ado, I have been Ashrathi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put Eve into context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you especially to my supporters, which are not here, because I had to reboot my computer. My top supporters: Abyssus, Aikawarazu Chan, Arydanika the Queen, Belligerent Neckbeard, BlackRoseNoble, Dajat Lemmont, Drake, Golden Age Stories, Jay Kuhn, LM1, Lumi, Malak Starfire, Midnight Space Monkey, Not Just Fun, Seats Aplenty, Serenolin with No Eyes, Syliana Vel'ash, Tgen Tgen, Nephilim, Grendel, Yantey Lepouf, Zaul Nex, as well as my Immortal tier supporters, 745 MPSI, Ebo Elite, May, Merc Utan, Nihilim, and Rid. Thank you guys so much, and I do actually want to point out that there's a little change there. I don't know if everybody noticed it, but one of my Immortal supporters went from being Bomber's Bar to 745 MPSI, and I just wanted to point out that he actually asked that to happen because 745 MPSI is doing their own MPSI fleets and whatnot, so they're, I assume, a relatively new group. I haven't heard of them particularly, so would be worth checking out and giving support. MPSI fleets are awesome. But with all that said, I have been Ashrathi, the voice of New Eden, and I'll see you in space. Oops. Holy crap, it worked this time.
Bring on the wrecking machine.
Subscribe! Thank you, LM1. See you guys in Discord.
For every city